Hi, good afternoon everyone. It's Erkan Ali here with Gill, Tiney and our extra special guest, Paul Baker.
Yes,
welcome.
Thank you.
So how many miles did you travel to join us today?
A couple 100 or so.
See, I travel 100 miles for one of your smiles. Well, welcome Paul. It's lovely to have you here. And I think we're going to have a really quite an interesting, in-depth conversation, but we'd like to invite you to just maybe set us on the scene with the subject we're going to spend some time around today, systemic win. One of the things we're committed to today in this conversation is to really highlight and demonstrate the principles, challenge them slightly.
A lot,
good, and see what we can unravel. And I think that's what we're here for. But is there anything you'd like to say about being on the podcast for the first time?
No, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to doing some more after this. Get them even better.
Get you going.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, there's going to be so much stuff. You're going to have me back.
Indeed. I always feel there's a part two coming with you when you've done any known be knowns or anything in the community. Do you want to set this conversation up for a systemic win? People are going to be going, what the hell's that?
Yeah. So I think the world actually is based on systemic win, but it's an unconscious process. Life is actually a systemic win. But I think we need to be doing it really consciously. So I want to make an invitation to you. Let's have a systemic win conversation where we're making the world better for each other. My world, your world, the BeCollaboration world, the world beyond. Let's do it really consciously. You up for that?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant.
But if you ask any person that, in the right mind, they would say yes, and then we look at the world and go, well, what's going on? I don't think we feel like the world is working for everyone. We notice there's wars, there's famine, there's disease, there's huge amounts of debt. What's happening? How would systemic win explain that?
Well, you see, I would say evolution is systemic win. But evolution is a really slow, painful process. Things go extinct. And I'd say that's actually the challenge for humans. We're on an amazing up. But if we don't look after our environment, whether it's the inner environment or the environment around us, there's really major problems coming up. It's more likely we'll be the next dinosaurs than we will be going on forever. We've got to actually work really hard and intelligently, or play actually, to bring that about. So it's like, are we going to go up and keep going up? We're going to go up and crash, and we're teetering on the edge, I think.
Well, I think what you just said at the beginning, are we consciously going to choose systemic win? Until it's vocalised like that, we would have sat down and gone, this is going to be a nice conversation, or we're going to challenge each other, and we would have hoped it would have come out. But by saying, is it going to be consciously systemic win, it's kind of set us up now for going, there's a different way of doing it than we would normally do it. And I've always been shocked whenever I've gone through an exercise of watching how I think. And I always show off that I'm a very positive person. I'm a Pollyanna. I'm always seeing the bright side. But then when you actually allow yourself to listen to that monkey brain, probably 70%, if not more, is negative. So actually, in a conversation, when you are purposefully setting yourself up for systemic win, you kind of have to go, I can't do that. I can't be that kind of negative. What if? So we're going to have a conversation and challenge, but that's a different aspect to kind of being in this downward spiral of but. It's the different space.
But to me, it's also important is that our biggest learnings actually come from what doesn't work, and actually then making something that does work. So something like flying is a really good example of that. Humans aren't meant to be able to fly, and yet it's now safer to fly than it is to drive a car. There was a really amazing thing after the Twin Towers came down. Lots of people thought flying was too dangerous, and they drove, and more people died in the routine driving than actually died in the Twin Towers. So more people trying to be safe actually made themselves more dangerous. But the flying is because we've learnt from mistakes and all the crash and accidents, it's now safer. So the mistakes have actually turned into something that's an amazing gift.
Before we get too far ahead, I remember a while back, last time I've heard you speak about systemic a number of times, but you used to use the body metaphor, didn't you, about how the body interacts with each other. and that's a good example of a systemic win-lose kind of principle. Is that a good? Would you explain like that today, or do you have different ways of explaining it?
I think we'll cover that in a bit, because that's a bit one of the things we need to talk about. Is systemic win is about being not selfish but being self-interested. And there's something that's really unique to systemic win, I would say, because people say, oh, you shouldn't be selfish, you've got to be altruistic, and then you say, well, okay, but the mum who doesn't look after herself can't look after her kids. But then lots of people are very selfish, and young kids are really selfish. And it's like there's a journey of selfish, I would say, is when you're really just, what I want right now, I don't care about anything else, consequences irrelevant. So the selfish is short-term, immediate, very narrow, while self-interested is much bigger and wider, and I'd say systemically self-interested is what we should be aiming at. So there's a sort of progression from selfish to more self-interested, and having a sense of ourselves as part of all of this, not just, and all of it being part of us, not just a sort of me and it thing.
I think I remember during growing up in the 80s, we had Thatcherism, we had this kind of self-success and yuppies, and it was like...
Not in my background.
It was very much a self-interest, independent way of viewing the world, and it was like, well, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, what's happening elsewhere, as you take care of yours and your own, and you'll make it. And I never felt easy, I was always uneasy about that. But the thing is that we're highly interdependent, so we're not independent in any way. We rely on as other human beings for so many things. We rely on the plants and the other species for everything from our oxygen to pollination to clean air. And we've got this kind of a delusion that actually our self-interest is somehow honourable to look after me and my own, as opposed to having a concern. And I really kind of can differentiate between self-interest and selfishness, because self-interest has a concern for the environment, for what impact we have on each other. Whereas I think there's like a immaturity in us as a species at the level of selfishness or independent.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's in a family isn't selfish. Mums and dads are not selfish. They can't be good mums and dads by being selfish, but they can't. But at the same time, they can't neglect themselves either. Yeah. And that's part of what we need. And one of the things I think kids learn is to delay gratification. It's not just because I want it right now. It's like BeCollaboration is the whole thing of setting it up is saying it's something really amazing in the future, and we'll take time and make investments to create that incredible future. And we could have a nice, more comfortable time right now, but we'd rather use that to invest in the future.
Yeah, but the problem is technology in the last 10, 15 years, and we've started to distinguish people of kind of our generation.
We remember the telephone, but you had to do that.
We are definitely pre-digital. I mean, most of our socialising, our growing up, our identities were formed pre-digital. But now, you go, oh, I've got an idea, I want to bang, you can straight away, you have access to the planet's information for a touchpad on your hand.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is on one level, it's absolutely... it's like imagine a couple of hippies in the 70s saying, hey man, one day you'll be able to just look into this mirror thing and it'll give you anything, get out of here man, you've had too much, But literally that stimulation, we are hooked on that technology, we're hooked on that everything everywhere. And in that experience, it's very, at a level, it's very it's an independent, self-absorbed interest.
So how are we going to make this practical? Because I don't know. Because it's really easy to go off into the sort of big ideas, and I guess my starting point with this was being really concerned about the environment, and not knowing whether technology was going to solve everything or whether environmental catastrophe was going to sort of undo everything. And this was back in the 80s, and I found that whichever side I was listening to, I was completely convinced by. So people who have really sort of aware of engineering technology could just paint a picture, and wow, it's going to happen, and then someone talk about the rainforests and the Amazon and all these things, and the fish being able to fish, and then I think, yeah, but they're right. And it's like, it's so easy to be convinced by people who have convinced themselves, and I think for me the truth that both of them are true. Technology is amazing, but it's only a servant. But we can also completely destroy our habitat. And for me, systemic win is how do we look after all these environments? Like, my body is an environment. More of my body isn't me. It's the things for whom I'm the entire universe, little creatures and stuff. And if I die, all of this stuff dies with me. It can't leave. At the same time, there's this massive planet that if it's not well, me, children, others, they're not going to be okay.
But many people trash their bodies, don't they? They eat wrong food, they drink too much, they don't exercise, they, I don't know, self-harm. There's loads of ways we do damage to even the most precious thing in our lives, is our own body.
Yeah.
So what hope we got for? I mean, I don't want to paint like a really negative picture, but I think there is.
Yeah. And at the moment, more people, the life expectancy across the world is longer now than ever.
We have got it better than we've had for many centuries.
Ever.
When you can exactly, and I think this feeling that people have of I deserve this when they've got so much already, and actually nobody deserves anything. It's about how we treat our planet, how we treat each other, and we don't really have that. The society that we live in is pulling for us to be isolated and independent and looking after our own and looking after ourselves and the rest of them. And until something like systemic win can come in and people can attach that what you do today has an impact, it has a ripple, it has an effect going on and on and on, whether that's yelling out the car at somebody because someone was crossing the road when they shouldn't have been, or trolling somebody on Twitter, or writing a angry email to the Times. Whatever it happens to be, there are little things that people have to stop and understand the repercussions. And if systemic win is something that they have a handle on and an understanding of, it's opening up their eyes to the fact that we are all connected and we are all within a system, whether it's individual system or a massive system. One of the things I liked you describing at a BeCollaboration meeting one day was the tree and the system within the tree and the system without, and how it went on. I just want to explain that again now because I thought that really illustrated well what you mean.
I mean, I think one of the things that we need to think of is that our identity doesn't exist just at one level. So for instance, if I look at the garden, there's a tree out there. From a certain distance it's really obvious it's a tree. Now if I went up in a helicopter, actually I would just see the woodland, or I'd see the housing estate, or whatever it was in the middle of, or I'd go further up and it would just be a bit of countryside, so that the tree would actually disappear. Equally, if I get really close to the tree, I just see a branch, I see a twig, I see a leaf, or I see part of a leaf, and I use the microscope. So there's just a right distance where something clearly exists. When you go smaller than that, you see all the parts that make it up. And when you go back out, you see it's part of something that's so much bigger. So it's like there's a very clear sense in it. I'm me and my body. We look at each other, it's really clear there's a person there. But it's not so easy to see you're a mum with kids. It's not so, that there is a bigger structure which you're really identified with. A good leader, so the family person thinks themselves as a family. They don't think of just, I just want this for me. The same thing happens with really good business leaders or really good politicians. They think of themselves as that whole, and they aren't just limited in being that little bit of it. But the other side to it is when you're really hungry, your stomach takes over your whole identity. It's like all the rest of you's gone. I just want something to eat right now.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's right down at the level of a part of you. Take it more seriously, something like if you've got heart problems, your whole system is limited by what your heart can do.
Yeah.
but your body isn't just to look after your heart. You know, the whole of me isn't just to look after my heart. I don't know, is that clear enough?
Yeah, I like that. It's exactly.
I think you've got to ask them. but it does take some listening, doesn't it? It does take some readjustment, because I think just thinking from the principles of the Be Inspired program about how much conditioning is driven to to separation, to create this understanding of us as separate and individual and different and independent. And I think a lot of our consciousness is there before we actually think about it. And I think if we were, I mean, imagine the Red Indian cultures were a lot more aligned to systemic win, that they were the land, they were part of an Aboriginal and maybe more indigenous people had a far more
relationship with the land,
less in the way to understand that what they're doing and what they take from the stream or the river or the sea is part of the whole. Whereas we go to the supermarket and pick up a chicken or whatever,
disassociated from
there's no connection.
Yeah.
We've lost that through industrialisation and modernisation, all the things we talked about. We've lost that moment by moment understanding that we're connected to everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure that there was this amazing, fantastic, harmonious past.
No.
I think things like the American Indians, some of them got to a really amazing level of understanding just before the Europeans arrived and everything fell apart. But I don't think their history, I think their history had plenty of really nasty stuff that wasn't particularly, it's like, do we pay attention to what's happening to our environment? Humanity hasn't done in the past. When humanity first got to Australia, complete and utter devastation. And when humanity first got to the Americas, again, the amount of devastation was unbelievable. A number of species got wiped out and things. So, you see, one of the things I think is that in evolution, you never have to look after, nothing ever has to look after the environment. The environment is so amazing. All creatures do is take from the environment and they discharge into it. And we're the first creature, as far as I can see, that actually has to say we've got to limit ourselves. We've become so powerful through technology that we can actually damage our environment. No other creature can seriously damage its environment.
Well, most other creatures create an environment, don't they? When you put, was it wolves back into, I don't know, it was America or Scotland or somewhere, they put wolves into this area and then the whole place changed and other animals came in and other things grew and it was just because of the reintroduction of a native species into that area created a whole ecosystem around it. It was phenomenal.
There's a really interesting one about that with the national parks in America, is that they actually realize they need to put the top predator in, which is humans. Back into the national parks, actually there as hunter-gatherers. That whole system evolved with all of that.
Did you hear there's a couple that had bought some land, I think down in Dorset or somewhere, and they wanted it to go back to nature. And the first season, all the brambles took over and all the pathways disappeared and all their neighbours were like, "You're crazy, go and get some weed killer and get rid of it all." But they stood their ground and they waited and waited for it to... And what happened again, different predators came in, they had the deer arrived and then they had various other creatures, the badgers turned up and eventually they got otters in the river. But bit by bit, one time there was a load of insects that were not doing any good, then a load of butterflies turned up and got rid of the insects and it just, nature took care of what man wasn't taking care of, and eventually they were able to bring in some livestock, some hogs and different creatures that should have been there, that again they were like, oh, these pigs are running riot all over the place, but eventually they were the ones that looked after the pathways so they could see all the pathways were back in. So it took about 5 years of holding their faith and holding their nerve, and now they've got a perfect nature reserve and they are living off of the land. So we are so busy to slash and burn in everything, isn't it? It's like even individually as a person, oh, you're overweight, go on a diet. It's a 5-2, you starve for 5 days and eat for 2, or is it the other way around? There's kind of that, it's all or nothing, and again it's like, I deserve this, I want this, so we become consumers. We're going to buy this solution, we're going to buy that solution. I seem to have found lately it's an awful lot of people that are navel gazing and working on themselves. And I'm like, well, yeah, but work with other people as well, because then you learn more about yourself when you're hearing how you appear to other people.
You see, I suppose what I would say is there are 3 levels to ourselves. You know, there's that sort of central level which we can identify, sort of seeing a sort of body, mind being over there. But if we don't realise we are also the environment and identify with it, I can't just say, oh, it's that out there. With the power and influence we have, we've actually got to step up. You know, it's why people talk about leadership, is that it's not so much the leader does the amazing thing, but they hold the whole picture. You know, a good leader is looking after the whole that they're part of. They're not just saying, I want it all for me. So that's what we need to do, is to shift that identity up. You know, one of the things I'm really interested in is how do we make sure that the children aren't even conceived or born yet, have a better world to come into. So who are those of us who are holding that space to make sure that we're not just using it up now, and there's just pollution and mess for them later on.
Yeah. And I think that's your role within BeCollaboration, isn't it? You are holding the space. You've created it. You had the vision behind it, but now your role is not to go around bringing in collaborators. It is to hold the space for those that are coming in. I
think not just hold the space, but set the tone and let people engage with it. So this morning I posted on Journey of Possibility Facebook page, and I was out this morning. I go out early in the morning at 6 in the morning. I do my 4-mile walk and come back and some stretching, a bit of jogging. But I kind of found myself a little bit been doing a lot of talking lately in front of the room and and I was like, what do I want to talk about today? What do I want to bring to notice? And I was just like looking around me, looking at like you said about the trees. I just started to look at the trees and started to focus in on one tree, and I went up and I thought, I'm going to hug this tree. So I put my arms around the tree and I just started hugging it. And at first I felt a bit awkward, a bit weird. I was going to walk past and and I wouldn't say it was some kind of miraculous experience. There was. I don't think I got that present to it, but I was there. I was doing it, and I thought to myself, you know what? What I said is actually today, take some time. We live in I'd say at the moment, there's 2 big scarcity conversations we live in, I believe, and one I call the money cult, and the other one's the scarcity of time. So I just paused the camera for a bit. I was walking over the river, and I just stopped and paused the camera. I went, take time today and pause, and just breathe. I said, so I was 50 a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you know Paul.
I think anyone BeCollaboration didn't know would probably be deaf and blind.
They're not paying attention. But I kind of thought to myself, if we're redistinguishing this fear scarcity paradigm, and there isn't enough time, and I'm not enough, and you're not enough, and Gill's not enough, and it's bigger. I think he was joking. He was kind of pulling my tail a bit earlier about being paranoid. I don't believe that's true, and I'm sure he was joking. But if we really think it's that doomed, then we've got inside that scarcity paradigm. We've already apathetic. We've already given up. And I think in terms of holding the space, that's what this is about. That's why we're spending an hour having in-depth conversations. Sometimes they're fun and light, but also they're very meaningful conversations about getting these ideas out. So if we think in a certain way, then we act in that way. Then the outcomes, it's not. In fact, I think this is what I said. It's a classic coaching. You look at the problem, you change your view of the problem changes because you don't have an independent view of anything. It's all through your filters, so you can, chop and change. So I think, in terms of systemic win, is we are seeing more and more evidence supporting everything we set out to achieve. Today being a brilliant day for that. And I said to her, don't worry, by the end of the day, someone will tell you, I said, some arsehole will tell you today you're doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
And I thought, and at the end of the day, you can't be too connected to what people endorse and what they don't endorse. No. You kind of got to keep learning and keep taking ground. And I think in terms of systemic win, are we still producing the outcome that we intended to, like regularly, despite the setbacks?
I mean, I think one of the things that's really important in some ways, systemic win is one side and the other side is systemic lose. And I think I should also say a bit about the background, because I came across the idea of you should go from win-win to sort of win-lose to win-win.
Yeah.
From sort of Stephen Covey. And I always thought, that's interesting, but it's just, it's really easy for you and me to win, but we're already organised and in a good place. And it doesn't take care of others around us, and doesn't take care of the environment, or it could even be win-win-win.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we take care of that whole that we're part of? That's why I call it systemic win. It has to work for me, for you, but it has to work for that which we're part of as well.
Well, in the vision and mission, we did say, I know we said win-win-win in the vision and mission. So what I was alluding to is we win, our collaborators win, the planet wins. Yeah. It was articulating what you've articulated in more depth, I'd say. It was like anything I do, or we do as an organisation, creates positive outcomes that we're working towards that, as opposed to business says, step on someone else and get where you need to get to. It's only business, don't take it personally, and all that kind of self-interest. And we still see it to this day. Someone will get in front of the room and start presenting, and I'm looking there going, and I'll look at Jill look at me and goes, that is some person in front of the room in their identity surviving. Wanting to look the part, wanting to impress, wanting to be loved, wanting to be acknowledged.
Yeah, well, if I'm in front of the room, I'm doing that. Point it out, please.
But this isn't criticising. We're not criticising anybody.
It's an observation.
It's like anything. If you're a music producer, you can tell someone sing.
But it's limiting. I mean, it has a limitation that's just not needed.
But it's hard. But I think the thing is, going back to the systemic lose side of things, I think we're highly conditioned to that, to survival. And I think that's the issue.
I mean, the really simple idea, in some ways it's too simple, is that in the moment, something's going to happen and I'm going to react and then respond to it. Does what I do, reacting and responding, make it better or worse? And if I make it worse for you, so I might do really well, but you're not going to help me next, you're probably going to do the opposite. So if I react well, so it gets better for you, you react well, it gets better for those around you. We are creating systemic win, and life actually does that. That's evolution. But it's really easy to go the other way, where something happens, I react badly, I make it worse for you, you make it worse for those around you, and we all just, it goes into a downward spiral. And we really need to name which we're in.
Yes.
Because I do quite a lot of conflict resolution, mediation, that type of stuff. And the bit of advice I always give, I say that if you're in a conflict and someone says something that upsets you, hurts you, irritates you, you will feel justified in saying something horrible back to them. And they will then probably do the same to you. But are you going to cope better with the escalated situation? So don't escalate the situation. However justified you feel, however right it feels, well, I'm suffering so they should suffer. But that creates systemic lose. But so often in our interactions, we don't, our immediate thing is, I feel justified doing this, I feel like doing it, I'll do it. And we've really got to look at those systemic consequences. And so many conflicts just escalate and escalate. And I think it's one of the worst things in our society, that we sort of think it's okay for people to fall out and then they don't talk to each other again.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
But it pollutes all of our atmospheres, because then it's like, I can't talk, you're my friend, but I can't really talk to, because it's
like if a couple get divorced and it's like, well, who do you get in the custody as a friend? Do you get him or her? You know, it's like there has to be, you have to take sides, and I'm not into that at all. Interestingly though, how do you find it? Now you've identified systemic win for yourself, have you noticed a change in your relationships? Have you kind of put it into relationships where you can say, well, before systemic win, that relationship would have been lost, but now we've kept it going?
That has been one of the things that's almost motivated me.
Right.
Was I would rather, if I've made a mistake, there's some friendships, you meet someone, it's still okay, and something happens, you think, oh, don't like him, okay. But I find so often, if I push through that, you actually find there's real gold there in that person, but it's just, it's something at the face value. Now sometimes, some people are pretty dodgy and you have to be careful with, but I'd much rather find the best in people And because if I'm not finding the best in them, they're not going to be finding the best in me. So again, it's the systemic win option. When you also have enough truth in the conversation, you can say, well, that bit troubles me.
Yeah.
I have a really good friend who, sometimes we have really major riots, but we're sort of working out, well, where's the limit? Where's the point where, okay, you've become upset. We're just going to take a time out now, rather than we're going to just escalate it and shout at each other.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's really difficult. I mean, I'm going to say, you need a third person. A lot of the time is when part of the thing is when things are going well, it's really nice with two people. When things start to go wrong, you actually need an outside help. You need some facilitation. And I would say it's almost back to the thing you were saying about the independence and the interdependence. We need to do a lot more stuff in threes. And this idea, two's company, three's a crowd, that's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
And it's just not true.
Yeah. This goes back to our basic big definition of collaboration, that the 3 is the magic number, because you're going to get 3 different viewpoints in order to create something that on their own independently they wouldn't even have discovered. And it just it makes sense, doesn't it? There's always got to have that third eye.
I'm also going to say that the third person in some ways can represent the whole. I mean, so in some mediation and facilitation situations, the sort of 2 individuals are almost like in their positions. Well, if the third person could just be a third position, but if they do that holding, that containing it, or an analogy I sometimes use is, if you look at a coin, what's on one side is very different from the other, and you ask the person to describe, in their position, they're one side of the coin, the other person the other side of the coin, and the whole coin is both. And so that's the third person can really help the 2 people see the whole picture, not just the one side.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd like to, I want to say challenge. Do you think there's a branding issue with the name Systemic Win? Because I find it.
Some people love it and some people hate it, and you're one of those bad people who hates it.
No, I don't hate it. But I think it might get in the way of more people getting it. Do you think? I mean, is systemic. I'm creative. I came up with the name BeCollaboration at the time. No one went, yeah, that's great. Everyone went, that's a bit of a. So don't worry.
You tried javelin.
No, but everyone says that. That was the working title, right? Because we had to call it, because there's something about naming it. I think there's something really important you said earlier on, and I remember you saying this. So correct me if I'm wrong. You said a bit like gravity. Until someone called it that, it wasn't something that we could have a clear understanding of. And I guess we still don't really have a clear understanding of gravity. But the point is, when we say gravity now, everybody kind of has understanding. You let go of something, things go down, and that's why we're not floating around. Now I think we're by naming something, it's a distinction. It starts to put it into common parlance, but also
it's a bit like
understanding.
If you don't know the name of a person, it's really difficult to refer to them. You have to describe.
The guy with the you can't come with all that.
Well, we can say, it's Erkan. Yeah, it's really straightforward. Naming is such a fundamental thing, but it's also a problem because sometimes because you've named it, you think you know it, or you know the person. But I just haven't found a better word because it is systemic. Because it's not just me and you. It's not linear. It is about the different levels. And we can win or we can lose. And something I want to talk about is the idea that life is a game and the different types of game that we can play. But as I said, I just like the idea that the words actually do relate to what we're talking about. It is systemic, and we can be winning or we can be losing.
But I think it's a bit like and I'm not. Listen, I think we should get a better name if we can get one. If you can get one.
What is your? I don't understand what your.
Well, I think the thing with
systemic's a bit of a. Don't know what that is.
Yeah, systemic to me, I think it kind of alienates straight off the bat. I think it kind of gets people going, well, that's going to be too complicated. It's systemic.
Hear from a man that wants to call his company Anarchy.
Anarchy is a great word, and I think gravity is a great word. I think systemic win. I just noticed that's what I can get over the name. Don't get me wrong, but I think for it to become common parlance, I think like gravity is one word, and it gives you that sense of. I think if you could come up with a word that just kind of just gives you that understanding, so to me it's like going take the word gravity out and explain gravity in 3 words. Oh, the pulley thing down thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, to me it feels a bit like that, rather than actually if we created a language where people kind of go, that's gravity, and we will have an understanding of it. Where systemic win, I think, for me, I think it might be beneficial to find a word that actually repositions the principles that you're saying.
Okay, I'm not going to spend any time doing that.
No.
I think, if other people want to,
yeah,
because I think there are enough good reasons to use it, and I also think there's an education thing. It's like our world, people do not understand systemic, and too much of it is about linear, and we actually really do need to start thinking systemically. So I think we've got to start using it so people actually.
So you think in some ways, no, we've got to use this language because it kind of articulates it in a way that right now is the best way we can do it.
Yeah, and if someone came up with some other word that was just amazing, of course, I'd actually be interested to have a competition. Some people call it systemic win, some people are calling it something else.
I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I've been doing quite a bit around Ikigai, which is the principles, the 4 circles that interlock, that says find what you love doing, really be good at it, make sure there's demand in the world for it, and get paid. And in the middle is a sweet spot, Ichigai, right? And the definition of Ikigai is reason for being.
Right.
Now, to me, I think we've got the reason for being bit of systemic win. Is that systemic win? But if you had a word that would just that kind of pulls it all together, then that's what we're talking about. And maybe it's semantics, I don't know.
I mean, I also think there's this almost like it's a branding thing. It's like, there are lots of words that didn't have any particular meaning, and enough people invest in them, and it has that meaning.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
So that's why I'm not going to put any more effort into it.
Yeah. Is that something you've been challenged on previously, or do you find it's not really?
What I find is that some people struggle with it. I've got an organic farmer friend who, because of systemic weed killers, doesn't like the word
straight away.
But that's a really unusual one.
Yeah.
I think on the whole, systemic is just the systems that we're part of are just so beautiful. I would like us to be thinking systemically. I mean, it's a bit like, to me, the difference between being self-interested and systemically self-interested. We do actually need that interest to be going out and out and out. So, I think systems thinking is just, if we don't start doing systems thinking seriously, our world's in trouble.
So in terms of, how long have you been working on systemic win as a concept, even before it maybe had that name?
Well, I couldn't quite work out. I've had the name for at least 15 years.
Right. Okay. So this is not a
fly by night.
No. How? This is a. I'm going to ask the question.
Yeah, go for it.
Why haven't you got? Why? It's because we've gone to people about BeCollaboration and they go, 60 members. You should be almost like ashamed of yourself to get out of it. Right? Why do you feel maybe you haven't got further than you would have liked to? What do you think's missing? Is it conditions?
I think it's many deficiencies in Paul.
Yeah. But let's go. But I imagine there is in all of us. But what do you think? It's also timing. Do you think maybe it's the consciousness that?
Well, you see, one of the things that I started this from really an environmental perspective, and I was expecting environmentalists to really be interested in it, and Green Party and so on. And there's a level at which I think it's the people I've expected to support it. Some of my friends say, "Well, I'm sort of doing systemic win," and I know lots of people are trying to make the world better and things. You're almost making something out of nothing. And I think they're very attached to doing it, to what they're doing, and they don't want that to be sort of insufficient. So I think some of it is it's actually a challenge to say we need to get strategic about making the world what we want it to be, and we need to be strategic about dealing with these difficulties and challenges that we're faced. So there's a level of which, if you want to achieve anything, you've got to be strategic about it. And also people don't like other people's ideas. No, initially, well, there's a thing. Most people want to stay with, with where they already are.
Yeah.
And we've got to, the early adopter thing. But I've struggled with even finding the early adopters. So I just think I'm just a strange person.
No, I think we've come across some of this in BeCollaboration, haven't we?
It's not,
when it doesn't fit into a box and people can't kind of identify it for themselves, they can't go, oh yeah, that's where it belongs. They don't know how to cope with it. And until you become articulate at sharing it, and you get a group of people around you that go, I get that, I need that, I want that, can I get involved with you? Then it starts having this momentum of its own. And it goes back to that video that we used to show in our introduction of the lone nut who's dancing crazily on the hill, and then people come up and start joining in, and then all of a sudden it's this mass hysteria because other people are following, and then nobody wants to be the last person to join. So they're kind of all in. And I think that's what happens is, again, you need to be strategic about it. And also utilise the technology that is out there in order to spread the word. But first of all, we've had issues with this, is identifying the message. When the message is really clear cut and it goes out and everybody can repeat it, but I was saying earlier, say it so you can say it to a 5-year-old, then all of a sudden it gets momentum and it starts moving and it starts going, oh, actually this is quite good. And then all of a sudden people start saying, oh, you're part of that thing. Oh, you're the one that started. Oh, I've heard about that. And it's quite gratifying when people you have no connection with start telling you about your group or your idea or your philosophy. And you kind of just sit there and go, oh, okay, it's getting there. But it takes a while. Now, you're 15 years in, but obviously I would imagine the first 5 years were you just identifying it for yourself and doing the research and doing the legwork and kind of going, actually, this is bigger than I first realised, and this could be powerful and valuable. And then, as you say, you've possibly got in your own way along the way because you've been on your own, and I think that comes back to collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue is that I'm a shy introvert who, sometimes doesn't think at all quickly and easily gets overwhelmed. And I'm not a natural person to be sort of bringing a world-changing thing into the world. So a lot of it is finding the people who actually want to, because it is a collaborative thing. Nothing complex is going to be achieved by a single person, however brilliant they are.
No, exactly. Have you, in all your years, come across anybody else that's doing a similar thing or has come across this philosophy?
No.
It's interesting.
Well, I came across this thing from Sweden called the natural step, an extraordinary Swedish doctor and scientist and researcher called Karl-Henrik Robert. And he's come up with this amazing system for how we get to sustainability and on a sort of science basis and all the rest of it. But the bit I noticed was that the bit about how to deal with people was weak. And the whole system has not taken off because that fourth system condition for sustainability, they don't know how to do it. So really I designed systemic win to be the missing link in that system. So,
so right now, is there like a white paper that you've written up? Is there like is it all up here? I mean, how does, if I wanted to, if someone's watching now and they wanted to do further research on it, other than get in touch with you personally, I mean, is there anything that,
there isn't a coherent body of written stuff about it. There's a website that's been that's in the process of being developed. Essentially, people have to talk to me. I think it's obviously I just want to talk to people.
That's lovely. That's lovely.
But also, I mean, I'm really interested in the people who want to spread the word. I don't want it to be Paul's systemic win. I'm not interested in that.
Well, that'd be kind of contradiction of the whole thing, wouldn't it?
But I mean, the most important thing, really the starting point of systemic win is who is not collaborating with you as you need them to collaborate for something that's really important to you.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question based back to you on that. I think there's something that you've brought up a few times. I've heard it, and I think you're missing a trick.
Only one.
It's the only one he's spotted.
He's just been kind.
No, I'm always kind to you. Right? So to me, there's this thing about how we react and how that reaction is embedded in our identity, in our own personal past. Because you may say something out loud and Jill will go, "Oh, that's fair enough," and I might get reacted by it. I might reactivate with what you've just said because I have a different past, and that what you've just said has a different meaning for me, and that would create a whole spiral of, I don't know, systemic lose or start us on the downward. So I think there's what I don't know if this is true, but I think what might be very valuable is for individuals to have an understanding of the source of their own reactions. Because if you walk into different people's lives and say different things will stir different emotions. And I think there's a certain requirement. And I think going back to what you said about why haven't more people taken it on? Because one thing we used to get is people would turn up in the early days more than now. They go, "Well, I already collaborate," and we're like, "Well, tell us how you collaborate." And they're not collaborating. They're doing something else. And maybe also how we distinguish collaboration today isn't how we were distinguishing it 4 years ago. I think the way we distinguish it now has been about 18 months, 2 years. This idea of something of value that is created by three people coming together that otherwise wouldn't exist. So actually it's the output. It's actually that there's things you can do on your own and you should go do those things. And there's things you can do with a couple of other people, but it's not a collaboration. It might be teamwork, it might be cooperation. I think a lot of people asked us about this at the beginning. But what we're kind of saying is that actually when you collaborate, you end up with something that you could, neither three individuals could have produced that output. Because and also there's something about losing the ego in the collaboration, because what comes out, Jill and I joke about this, right? "No, I came up with a accomplice." I came up with a accomplice. And I'm pretty clear it was me. But that aside, is we've managed to, well, we're working on it. But I think really genuinely, Jill and I have managed, and there are a number of people now that I feel kind of get that, is that almost like we don't really care. Was it Jill, was it me, was it half and half, and how do you monetize that or keep score of it is a real problem I think people have. And we just don't know, we just got something that explains accomplice, we've got something that explains collaboration, we've got something that explains fierce guessing competition. All this stuff is amalgamated, and the output is more important than the individuals. And at a level of identity, you kind of want to go, "Oh, I did that bit. I was that bit," because you got to trace it back to which bit do I own. Can I lose myself in systemic win when the bigger picture is more? Now I know it's not that you lose yourself completely because you've played a part, but on a level, at the level of identity, at the level of individual self-interest, selfishness, the selfish side, the ego wants to kind of own it or control it.
Yeah, and that to me is because you've got too narrow a sense of yourself. I mean, a story, I don't know if it's true, but I'm pretty sure it is, from the American Indians and the Eskimos. When a person gets really old, they take themselves out in the blizzard. Now they're not doing it, they're so identified with the tribe that they're looking after, they don't want to be a burden. Their spirit is completely in the tribe, and therefore their bodies become an empty shell that's no longer needed. So their ego has come up into rather than being it's me, this little bit. But
going back to this thing about how you react, if and I don't like the word react, that doesn't sound empowering to me, but how you respond, how you choose to.
I think react is useful because our living systems initially react, and then as our awareness comes into it, becomes more and more a response. And so I just see it as a continuum of responses that come out of it.
I get that. But the point I'm making is that reaction is highly not a reaction. It's part of conditioning, part of socialising, part of culture, values. So the reaction isn't actually an out-and-out reaction. It's if someone does something, you go, "Oh," and then someone else explains to you why they do it, you go, "Oh, well, that explains it because of what happened before." But if you look at it in isolation, it looks like a reaction, maybe, or it looks like unexplained. So I think it starts so early on in the human experience of the notion that we're interdependent, we're connected, everything we do has an impact. So systemic win, I think at the moment we're operating at the level of 50-plus-year-old adults, when the game is being played right down since children are born.
Yeah.
You know, because the first thing that happens in language, you go, you Paul, me daddy, you Paul, me daddy, and we start getting this notion that we're separate. Now, I wonder if there are good examples of systemic win that are naturally occurring currently in the human species, and how those children are nurtured at the early stages.
Or in the nature and in the early stages, is it irrelevant and it's only needed to be named and identified because of how we've been conditioned?
Well, I think it's kind of answered the question. So at this stage, in our current consciousness, in our current culture, a man has to hit that age for 15 years to try and get a bloody message around that we're all in this together, and what we do impacts everything, and we're all kind of, you know, to me it's not a complex message, but we're not conditioned that way. We have sports days, we have grading, we have houses within the, you know, if you look at it the way...
Yeah, okay, can I talk about the different games? And this is a bit theoretical, but I hope it's not too difficult.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that you could say that life is a game. And the thing is, in the theories of games, there are only 3 types of game. One type of game, you could call it win-lose, which is things balance up, a mathematical equation. If you add on one side, you subtract on the other. So that would be technically called a zero-sum game. So the other 2 games are non-zero-sum game. So a good non-zero-sum game would be, there's a really nice cake and 2 people both, you know, want a bigger bit of it, and they start to fight, and then they step on the cake. You know, in the end, they end up with hardly any cake at all, because they've spent all their time fighting over it. So, you know, so that's lose-lose. But a negative non-zero-sum game is the worst thing. No one wants to be in that. I would call that systemic lose.
That's a bit like nuclear war, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who wins out of that?
Exactly. And then the other game is the positive non-zero-sum game, where more and more is available. Now, I'm going to say that evolution, biology, is actually a positive non-zero-sum game. At one point, there wasn't apparently any life on Earth. Then there was a little bit of life. And then there was a little bit more. And over that time, there's become more and more life, and it's become more and more complex and evolved. So life itself is a positive non-zero-sum game. It is systemic win. And the other thing that's really magical about life, which is to do with death, which is, if you garden, if you want to grow enough stuff in your garden, you have to grow too much. And if you're going to say, okay, I want lettuces for the next couple of months, whatever it is, well, you've got to grow a lot more, because some of the seeds won't grow, some of the slugs will get eaten by, some of the, you know, someone will step on it, so you have to grow too many. Now, sometimes it all works, and you end up with just so many lettuces you don't know what to do with it. And the thing is, if we look at what nature does, what does nature do with the excess production?
Goes back in the system.
Eats it. You know, there's a really old symbol of a snake eating its tail. And I think, you know, that actually is what it is. You know, the excess life gets eaten, which creates more life. So we actually have to produce too much. You can't have a steady state game, because something will go wrong and then it starts to deteriorate. You've actually, to even stay constant, you actually need to be growing and increasing. And the idea that we're on a finite planet, and it's a really big issue, is, oh, we can't have growth on our planet. Well, we've always had growth in terms of the living things. It's got more and more complex, there's more and more of it. And the amazing thing is the spare bits get eaten to produce even more.
But what we have is such a consumerist society that we've got way too much, and that's the other end of the scale, isn't it?
Well, so you could say that if we go back to the environmental thing, we completely depend on the environment, and you depend on the environment for 2 things. One thing is, the obvious thing, is the resources. So Karl-Heinrich Robert talks about this. As a scientist, if you cultivate something in a petri dish, there's a whole bunch of growth, and it sort of dies back. And most people think it's died back because it's run out of nutrients. Do you know what's actually happened? It's all the waste products from that growth choke it. If all you do is you just wash off the dish, you will get the same growth 3 or 4 times before you start to get any level of lack of nutrients. So the two things that nature, our environment, does for us is it gives us all this stuff we need, but it absorbs all our waste. Right. The gardener, I'm keen on gardening. You compost it, and that, the forest floor, whatever it is, it becomes the new fertility. So it goes in, it gets processed, and that becomes food. And there's a really amazing thing about whales. They've discovered that because there are fewer whales, there are less krill and small things, because all the whale shit fed all these small creatures. And they went all the way down, put it up. So the whale shit is a really crucial part of the fertility of the whole system. So waste is really, it's a beautiful thing from permaculture, which is there is no such thing as pollution. All there is a valuable product at the wrong place in the wrong quantity. So you put your sewage in the river, it's pollution. You biodigest it or whatever it is, it's fertility and energy. And it's just so it's like, but what we do particularly badly is actually look after is the waste, and we're seeing with all the plastic pollution and stuff at the moment and things like that. So we're actually in a system that is growing, it's creating more and more opportunities, but we're not looking after the waste. And we're then saying, oh, but we can't grow, which is actually the wrong mindset. You can grow too fast, but we actually need to. The idea that we're going to create a steady state, forget it. Evolution is growing and developing, but we've got to work out how to limit ourselves.
But doesn't industrialisation kind of put a skew on that? So it's really interesting what you're saying. With the whales and the poo, and I can kind of get, introducing different species into different environments and I get all that. That kind of feels like nature doing the balancing the books. But Peter Joseph, who's written a fantastic book called The New Human Rights Movement and looks at industrialisation, one of the things he talks about is externalities. So if we look at corporations around the planet, not one would be profitable if it was actually responsible for its externalities. It's waste. It's, like you said, I can't remember how you actually said it just now, but basically that valuable product output in the wrong place is pollution. In other places, it's it's something else. So at the moment, if the bottom line, as we distinguish it generally, is profit and shareholder value maximisation, the externalities are something to be hidden, landfilled, thrown in the sea, or whatever they're doing with it. But actually, if we looked at a triple bottom line, social benefit, global, environmental, and all the other bottom lines that we need, those companies wouldn't be profitable in the way they are today, but they'd be sustainable in the way they're not today.
Absolutely.
And I think
we have a particularly stupid financial system.
Well, you say stupid, but I don't think it's stupid. I think it's in the benefit of few over the many.
Well, the other side to it is, I think there's a very good case if it wasn't for money, we wouldn't have achieved most of the stuff we've achieved in terms of development and everything else. So it's money is potentially amazing, but the form of money we've currently got is catastrophic.
It's horrendous. It's probably. Well, I was going to ask you, if you were looking at the macro, people say, well, how are you going to make a big difference to the planet? The first thing I'd look at is getting control of money out of private hands, out of our businesses, and into social concern rather than,
I mean, I agree with that. There's also another one I think about a lot, which is that there's very little that you can do in this world without money at the moment. You really do need money. And if you haven't got enough money, you can't get things you need. On the other hand, if you've got too much money, you can get things. I mean, you can buy the presidency of the US, for instance. But the thing is, I would like the people who have the money, because you can get amazing resources with it, to be the people who most want to look after people and most want to look after the environment.
But they clearly don't, do they?
Yeah, but you see, there's a level at which, as we have a responsibility, each one of us, which is how come we put into places of power and influence, and we vote them in. You know, we have significant influence. I mean, it is very simple. The world as it is, if you want to make lots of money, if you're prepared to be somewhat ruthless, somewhat exploitative, externalise your costs, there is really no limit how much money you can make. Once you get a certain point, you can just keep running the process. You're going to make more and more. If you want to spend your time looking after people and the environment, it's really hard to be well paid. There are very, very few jobs, and there are very few investment opportunities. So there's a society, but we're not saying, hang on, this is really odd. We're not rewarding the people who look after the environment and the people in it, because that's going to make us richer and richer. We're rewarding the people who actually exploit and abuse.
I would frame it differently, but I think we're saying the same thing, right? I think the small percentages of humanity or entities on this planet that run our global systems, and you know, we've seen power concentrate to fewer hands, and those interests don't have a concern for us. In fact, there's two major agendas on the planet. One's Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 to reduce human population. Right? So those interests, those macro interests, are not interested in a thriving, diverse human population. In fact, through robotics, AI, nanotech, we're going to see huge reductions in human population. That's why the research I've done that shows that there clearly is not an interest in the human species at the level that you and I would think there would be. There isn't. And the research I did over the last, like you've been at it a while, 15, 20 years, I came to a point where I said it's designed that way. If you look at anything anybody says, you might as well forget what they say, just look at the result, and that will tell you what they're committed to. At the moment, we have wars all over the place. America in 74 countries at the moment.
But you see, the other side of that is we have more peace now than ever before.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
No, we do not. We do not. 30 million Muslims have died since 2001. But you don't get that news in the mainstream.
If you do, anyway, we will disagree about this one. So
no, we don't have to disagree. Let's just hear each other, because chances are the source of your facts are from a different place to the source of my facts, right? That's not that we're disagreeing.
Sure.
I don't think we're disagreeing.
Well, one thing I want to do is, earlier on you said, well, you wanted to stop for a moment over the course of this day and just, so I'd also like us just to say, how are we doing in this, because it is such a big subject, we've got so much to talk about, and I don't know how much longer we've got.
Well, you know what, I don't know if my watch is doing, what time is it?
20 to 3.
Yeah, we've got about 20 minutes left.
We're in an hour, we've done an hour.
Alright, so do you want to stop now?
No, I think we're just getting started. We've taken an hour to get going. But I just want to say something, Paul. This is where I think the activists and the people that want to make a difference have to start hearing each other in the terms of their commitment.
Sure.
As opposed to, how did you come about your evidence and stuff? Because what we've done is, there's something, I don't mean to be patronising here at all, but the Hegelian...
You just can't help it.
No, but I can't help it, I will anyway. But the Hegelian dialectic gets us in conflict, even when we agree what we want to achieve. We know we want a world that works for everyone. We know we want a systemic environment, systemic win, a sustainable planet. We know that between the three of us. But even us, with that commitment and that knowledge and this enlightenment, we can still argue about where the facts came, whether he's right or she's right. And to me, I'm really, to an extent, I don't think any of that's really relevant. It's what are we going to really... We need to have an understanding in our minds of the causality. You know, how do these things come about? Then we can really get more effective in being, producing those outcomes. So I've found in my experience over the last 20 years, almost anything that's in the mainstream is just utter drivel, almost take whatever they say and turn it upside down. I mean, literally. Anything, BBC, mainstream, anything, any subject. That's been my experience. Because when I go off piste and I do the research I do, I come back, you just see it for what it is. It's mass hypnosis, mass propaganda. So and also going back to what Gill said about, we're creating and cultivating, individuals to compete and consume as a society. We're becoming sophisticated consumers, and I'm using the consumer this week as and I'm like, I don't want to be a consumer. I'm not a consumer.
Yeah, you are.
No, but
only in part.
But we are all consuming. But
I
I'm
agree.
not waking up every day thinking about what am I going to buy, where am I going to go, what am I going to... They're not my motivations.
You are probably 90% down that road compared to a lot of people who can survive without spending any money whatsoever. There was a lady I read about a little while ago that she's got 50 pence to her name and everything she does. And the rubbish that she's created in the last 5 years can fit into a little jar like that she couldn't recycle or get rid of. So people live their lives to a much more new planet way of thinking. But as you said earlier, we're on the same page. So the stuff, where you get your information from, what you choose to believe, what I choose to believe, the bottom line is that's past. We can learn from the past and what we don't want to do, and it's creating the future. And if we can identify something like systemic wins, so that Mr. Joe Blogs out there, Joe Public, has a tool to use when they can see a relationship going wrong, when they can see their business partner not working well, when they can see their future not being created the way they want it to. If they can work on that, use that tool, and the same way that we profess about collaboration, if they learn how to have systemic win in order to collaborate, then anything is possible. So whoever is running the planet, or whatever system is out there, or political leaning, or government, dictator, we have a mass opportunity with technology to actually make that difference. And whilst we're sitting here as three people pontificating about what could be, we actually have huge potential as a collaboration to take what you've been studying for the last 15 years and to take what you and I have been studying for the last 20 and 10 years in order to impact other communities, other people, other societies. So one of my objectives over the next few years is about meeting up with other people like the Ubuntu movement, different networks that are out there that are trying to do what we're trying to do. That one that you spoke about that didn't have systemic win, and it was about the people. They were doing all these lovely things, but they didn't have a core place to support the people. And I've seen a few communities like that as well. And you look at the little website and you go, oh, they're doing that, we're doing that. Oh, they're doing that, we're doing that. They're doing that. Where's the culture? Where's the vision and mission? And they don't have. And it makes you wonder, how long are they going to be able to carry on until there's an argument or a disagreement or a conflict that makes it all go like that, which is what a lot of the people at the top of the tree kind of get used to. Oh, don't worry about them, they'll burn themselves out before you know it.
Well, I think I'll go 100% what you said, and what I'd add to it is also I think there's a lot playing against these things happening as well. Movements get infiltrated.
Yeah.
People get, they get discredited. There's many people that we can think of that were coming along, making massive progress. They disappear, they get discredited, they get their licenses.
But that's always happened in life, isn't it? It's life. That's what it is.
No, it's not life. I think it's not life. I think these things are actually orchestrated. It's not natural. It's not like a natural occurrence. There are controlling influences. And I think they're the things that most people aren't talking about, thinking about.
I mean, you see, the question is how much of these things are some very clever people being very strategic, and most people just not missing it, and how much of it is just there is something about that's how life works. So there is a principle. It's an interesting one in the Bible, the Matthew principle. The more those who have will get more; those who haven't, even what they've got, will be taken away from them. And you actually see that in the difference between rich and poor. So that there is this unbelievable difference between the rich and the poor, and it was quite interesting. Do you know why the game Monopoly was produced?
I didn't remember. Yeah.
It was the person. It was I think a Quaker or someone. He basically said, "Look, if you have these financial games, someone always ends up with everything, and everyone else ends up with nothing." And there is something about that there is that tendency where a few end up with everything, or there are a few who are geniuses who do everything. You know.
Well,
okay, but you say you have to look at some of the. There is some statistical stuff around this, that it's not. There is a tendency for that to happen anyway. Doesn't mean you have to tolerate it, but it doesn't require conspiracy theory to bring it about.
Well, I think that's exactly what's missing.
Well, because the other thing I'm going to say is that, do you think that there's a more equal distribution of wealth between socialist countries or capitalist countries?
I don't differentiate. I think they're all part of the same system.
Yeah, but
broadly speaking.
But so do you think there is any difference?
No, not really. I think there are. I think the branding of socialist, communist, blah 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 is very interesting. But they're not. They're not. As soon as a country starts to break out of the current global monetary cartel, they're invaded. You know, Libya was invaded. Saddam Hussein was invaded. Any country that was to start doing something for itself and break out of the current cartel of the current banking system. So you say there is. I think this is the thing that I'm going to take some stand on here, right? Because you're intelligent enough to handle this, right? No,
that sounds very patronising.
No, because if we're not going to have these conversations, then you know what? We're wasting our time.
Right? I'm going to preempt it because the thing about it is, I'm not sure how I can either prove or disprove the conspiracy.
Forget proving it or disproving it.
Well, no, it's important to me. So the reality of it, what I'm really interested in is, what do I as an individual do? What help do I get with those around me? You know, maybe there are some of these really dodgy people who are doing all of this stuff, and there's they're lizards or whatever you want to call them. You want to go down the David Icke line of it, etc.
I wasn't going to. No. Yeah, but that's what. But
I'm really interested in how do the three of us here collaborate together to make a difference, whether or not there are those things going on.
I think we've got to look at. Say we look at money. I think money is a really brilliant place to look. Okay, and. There's a in the Be Inspired program. I use this slide over the years. It used to be 80 people, then it was 40 people, then it was 20 people, then it was 8, and I think it's like 4 people, 4, whatever, right? So the current monetary monopoly creates hoards a huge amount of wealth in very few people's hands, globally speaking, right? We this is not a conspiracy. Oxfam, You've got the Positive Money organisation. Monetary supply, monetary issuance hasn't been debated in the Houses of Parliament. It was done in November 14, first time for 170 years, right? That's not conspiracy. That's all mainstream information. I think where I would go in this modern era is I'd look at the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, where the issuance of currency was hijacked and controlled by a few over the many, by private businesses. Now, Federal Bank of England, we think of these things as state-owned. They're not. They're privately owned. And if you were the potato farmer in the village and you farmed all the potatoes out there and you had control of all the potatoes and you could produce 100 potatoes a week, but you were allowed to say that you had 1,000 potatoes instead of 1,000, like muster them out of nothing, you go, well, this is like, what is this? This is a corruption in itself. So money is created at the very source out of nothing by private businesses and loaned interest for the rest of us, for the rest of the society. So just our debt burden alone in the UK is 190. Listen, I know I'm hitting you with facts, but we carry a huge amount of debt burden. So clearly there's an attack on the working efforts of the ordinary human being on this planet, because we are servicing debt that never existed in the first place. So to me, if I was going to look anywhere, I'd look there first. I'd understand that inside out, and then look at how do we transform that. What I think the problem is that we've also been conditioned against conspiracy. So if we start thinking and start asking awkward questions, we get called a conspiracy theorist.
Okay, so my question though is, let's say there are a bunch of people who are powerful and very well resourced, who are, they're following their agenda and they really don't care about anyone else's.
I think you're spot on.
Yeah. So what do the rest of us do about that? That's
a really good question.
That's the fundamental question, which is why I think the whole collaboration thing is so fundamental. I mean, there's a really interesting thing. In chimpanzee society, if one chimp is the biggest and the strongest and the most tyrannical, how long does he last as the leader? Not very long. Before long, two of the fairly strong, backed by all the female chimps and others, that chimp is
take him out.
Well, literally torn apart.
Wow.
Or castrated, which, you know, well, I mean,
Wow.
it's very...
Sounds like a good plan.
No, chimpanzees are not very nice. But it's not the biggest and most brutal that wins. You know, they have a collaborative system. If one individual goes over the top, they get taken out.
Yeah.
So our collaboration, I mean, it's part of the thing is we do need to collaborate. We need to name the stuff that is really unsatisfactory. And we also need to, you know, to stand with each other enough. Another simple analogy would be, you know, one Maasai warrior with a spear and one lion. The lion's going to win really easily. A bunch of Maasai warriors with spears and the lion hasn't got a chance.
Yeah.
You know, our ability to collaborate to overcome stuff that is really powerful and destructive is incredible.
Yeah, I think in principle you're spot on.
But
there's
the but.
You're trying to make a point.
Yeah, but in 2001 we had 9/11. The day before Donald Rumsfeld announced.
Can I ask a question?
Hold on, no, I said we just.
Is this going to be in the spirit of this?
Yeah, no, it is. I think it completely is. I think you know, Donald Rumsfeld announced $2.3 trillion missing in the budget. Like, you think of 2.3 trillion. No, but they've announced more money missing. They can't explain it. We don't know where it is. We've got you know a $8 trillion military complex. So I think what we're dealing with is the guy, the big gorilla at the top, right? Has not only got everything, they've got the money to buy anybody and everything. They've got the money to corrupt any scientific research. They've got the money to corrupt the professors in the universities. Across the board.
Yeah.
We are still the majority.
So what I'm saying is raising that consciousness, getting people out of survival, out of fear, scarcity and competition to love.
But you see, that is quite fear-based. I mean, I would say it's a real fear. I mean, we should, that stuff, it's... A while back there was this place outside Bristol and the Bristol Zoo had their sort of overspill there, and it was an old stately home. And there was a tiger in the cage behind it, you know, and I was sitting up on the sort of level, and I get really close to it, and I thought, I'm really glad that's in a cage. You know, that was the sense of sheer power and things. Yeah, it was absolutely magnificent, and I was really glad I was not in its space. So there is some stuff that we really should be afraid of, or at least we should really treat with great respect. So it's like, how do we treat this stuff with great respect and not put up with it? That's what and that's why I think systemic win is incredibly helpful.
I think it is helpful, and I think not having a good understanding of what's happening, the causality, I think is where a lot of so-called intelligent people are.
We're running out of time, but one of the things I want to say is that I think we've tried a very long experiment, which is when you have something of value, what you do is you protect it by violence, because you know those other people are going to try and take it away from you. I think, and then you end up with locks, with doors, with armies, with castles, with navies. It just goes on and on. So we've tried to protect valuable stuff by force for a very, very long time. But there's another way of looking at it, which is if I contribute a lot to those around me, they're not going to take the stuff that I value, because they're not going to then be able to get what I've got to give them. So if we actually start to base our security on really looking after those that contribute, so it's like, if I've got to look after myself enough. If I'm trying to make sure that my neighbours are better off than I am, and my neighbours' neighbours are better off, and we're all trying to do that, we're going to create a very different world than, because at the moment, if you have a neighbour who is somewhat better off than you, doesn't have anything to do with you, you know, doesn't give much to the local charity and stuff, you know, you don't like them very much. I certainly I don't. And if something unpleasant happens to them, I don't exactly feel, oh dear.
There's no empathy, connection.
No, I mean because they're completely isolated. And equally, if someone is much worse off than you, and you think they might want what you've got, or whatever, then again you want those around you to be pretty much as well off as you. And in fact, if you make them just a little bit better, that's the safest thing we can do.
Yeah.
And that's why I think in BeCollaboration we've got that spirit. And it's
because at the end of the day, the people that are the ones that will stripe you up or steal from you or knock you over the head for your watch or whatever, they are in the minority. We have to remind ourselves that the majority of the people are walking around on this planet in a safe place. So by being that with the people that we know, it is going to create this giving mentality. And if you look at David Hawkins, he's the one that's talking about raising consciousness and it having this ripple effect. So what we are doing, albeit in a small way at the moment, is creating that start. And there are the big bad boys at the top, whether you call it conspiracy theory or whatever you call it. But there always has been in history. And now we have an opportunity to do something about it.
So how are we going to round off this conversation? Because we've only got a couple of minutes.
I know.
Well, I'd like to round off this. I think it's complex, it's challenging, and I think to have the courage to talk about it openly is what it takes. And I think the more informed we are, the more we understand, the better we can solve the problem, or the challenge of a world that works for everyone. And I think there's, in my opinion, I've spent 20 years researching because I wanted to know. And I spent a lot of time on it. And I don't think many people do. I think many people are engaged in entertainment, they're engaged in experiences, they're engaged in consumerism, they're engaged in survival. They've got the money and the...
So what are the three of us going to do that's going to, out of this meeting, what's the one thing we're going to do? I mean, what I'm interested in is anyone who's actually got something that they want some help and support in, I'm really interested in helping you be more successful.
Yeah. Helping you identify the systemic win within that problem, whatever that issue is.
And turn the systemic lose or the non-systemic win that's happening into systemic win.
And on that note, it's probably been the longest podcast we've done almost. Paul Baker.
But do you know what? I think this is part one. There's more to come, isn't there? We're going to have to do this again.
Well, I think we'll then read
we could easily max out the SD card on this one. So, Paul, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. Well done.
So that's Paul Baker's Systemic Win. We'll put all Paul details below the video. Gill, Tiney, my co-host, me, Erkan Ali. Be inspired. Next program is on the 22nd of September, redesigned and fresh for you guys to participate in. So take care. Have a lovely summer. Bye.
Bye.
Well done. They cut.
Is it off?
No, still on. I've got to get up and put it on.